For years, they laughed at Daniel. Not openly, not cruelly, just enough to make him feel small. They said he was slow, that he lacked ambition, that he depended too much on others. But when the court file was finally opened, everyone realized something terrifying. Daniel had never been useless. He had been used. Daniel was the kind of person people underestimated easily. He was soft-spoken. He avoided arguments. He never tried to dominate conversations. In meetings, others spoke over him. In family decisions, he was consulted last, if at all. In any dispute, he was always the one expected to compromise first. People mistook his calm for confusion, his kindness for weakness, and Daniel learned early on that correcting them only made things worse. So he stopped explaining himself. He simply let them believe what they wanted. When Daniel's older brother started a small logistics business, the entire family celebrated. It was a source of pride, a symbol of success. But when the business started to struggle, when the initial excitement wore off and the harsh realities of running a company set in, all eyes turned to Daniel. He was asked to help out temporarily, just for a little while, they said, until things got back on track, but temporary soon became permanent. Daniel found himself handling the endless mountains of paperwork. He covered unpaid balances with his own savings. He signed documents he was told were just formalities, pieces of paper that meant nothing. Every time a seed of doubt sprouted in his mind, every time he asked a question, he was met with the same reassurances. Trust us, Danny. This is family. We look out for each other. You don't need to understand everything. Just sign here. So Daniel trusted. And that trust would end up costing him years of his life. Inevitably, the business collapsed under the weight of its own mismanagement, and when it did, a scapegoat was needed. The blame, heavy and suffocating, needed a direction. It found Daniel. Suddenly, the narrative shifted entirely. He was no longer the helpful younger brother. He was irresponsible. He was careless with money. In fact, he was painted as the sole reason everything had failed. The whispers started, then grew into loud accusations. Friends who once clapped him on the back stopped calling. Relatives who had praised his loyalty now spoke cautiously around him, their words laced with suspicion. Opportunities he once had quietly vanished. Throughout all this, Daniel didn't defend himself. Not because he couldn't, but because he knew no one was really listening. They had already made up their minds. While others moved on, rebuilding their lives and their reputations, Daniel was left behind to deal with the wreckage. Debt notices flooded his mailbox. Legal warnings arrived with alarming frequency. He was hounded by questions he had no public answers for. But privately, in the quiet of his small apartment, Daniel started keeping records. It wasn't for revenge. It wasn't to accuse or expose anyone. It was simply to understand. To piece together the puzzle of how his life had gone so wrong. He meticulously organized contracts. He compared signatures, noting the subtle differences. He cross-referenced dates that just didn't align. Slowly but surely, patterns began to appear. And every single one of them pointed away from him. Daniel's silence lasted for years. During that time, others flourished. His brother started new businesses. New reputations were built on the ashes of the old one. New stories were told, stories where Daniel barely existed, a forgotten footnote in a chapter they were all eager to close. What they didn't know was that Daniel's quiet, unassuming life had become an archive, a library of truth. Every transaction, every instruction, every single moment he had been told to just sign here was cataloged and preserved. He never confronted anyone. He just waited. The case didn't start because Daniel finally decided to speak up. It started, as these things often do, because someone else made a mistake. A disputed asset, a routine background verification, a single document that led to another, and then another. Suddenly, Daniel's name appeared again. But this time, it wasn't as a failure or a scapegoat. It was as a key witness. When the court finally reviewed the full file, the carefully constructed narrative that had protected everyone else for so long collapsed like a house of cards. The evidence was undeniable. Signatures had been forged and misused. Authority had been falsely implied. Responsibility had been deliberately and systematically redirected onto the one person they knew wouldn't fight back. Daniel hadn't mismanaged the business. He had been positioned as a human shield, designed to absorb the impact when it all came crashing down. A profound silence fell over the courtroom, because everyone in that room realized the same thing at the exact same moment. Daniel had carried a burden of blame that was never his to bear patiently, silently, and completely alone. The court's ruling corrected the official records. It reversed the financial liabilities that had haunted him for years. It exposed the web of manipulation for what it was. But it couldn't give Daniel back the years he had lost. It couldn't undo the whispers, the isolation, or the pain. After the verdict, people from his past began to reach out. Some offered awkward, hollow apologies. Some had the audacity to pretend they had always believed in him. Most said nothing at all, hoping to just fade away. Daniel accepted none of it. He didn't need their validation anymore. He had found his own. Daniel didn't win loudly. There was no triumphant celebration, no moment of vindication where he pointed a finger and said, "I told you so." He simply walked out of that courthouse, lighter than he had been in a decade, and didn't look back. And the people who had once so easily dismissed him learned a very uncomfortable and very important lesson. Silence is not always confusion. Patience is not a weakness, and the person that everyone underestimates is often the one holding the full, unvarnished story. Thanks for watching. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing for more content.